This is Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today's podcast is brought to you by Water and Wellness. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit Water and Wellness at their offices, and I can tell you that as far as you and I are concerned and our health is concerned, this is one of the most important places that you can go to find water that is purified and products that will help your longevity and your overall health. Visit waterandwellness.com to learn how you can take control of your drinking water and learn about those natural additives to optimize your health and longevity. Contact Stacy at 877-296-6880. Use the Ageless code and you'll get a 20% discount on all your products.
My love for you is immeasurable. My respect for you immense. You're ageless, timeless, lace and fineness, your beauty and elegance.
Well, hello everybody. This is Michelle Hughes calling you or speaking to you and hoping that you're viewing and not just listening today I'm in Los Angeles. Of course, you all know that California is in lockdown, so I'm sitting quietly in my room instead of going to our studio in Burbank. But it is what it is, and we're very lucky to have Zoom. And our guest today is in, I believe, Palm Beach, hopefully in nice warm weather. Our guest's name is Fred Lane, and he is the founder of Lane Generational, which is a part of the stock firm called Raymond, which many of you know, chairman of Names, and he is a specialist today in capital markets and capital advisory services. So formerly, he was an investment banker with Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, and several other of the major investment banking firms. So as he very humorously says, he is now selling what he used to manufacture. So Fred, I'd like to say welcome and hope that you're in good health, and would love to have you tell us more about you. And are you in Palm Beach today, or are you in Massachusetts?
No, I came down to Palm Beach about a week ago. Actually, my son, who's in the private equity business, banished me from Boston because he has 4 children. My daughter has a young child as well. And his view is that young children are like cesspools and they're going to make you sick, Dad. So his view was, no, you got to get out of here. It's in your best interest. So my wife Beth and I are self-quarantining down here in Palm Beach. It's actually quite good.
Well, good. That's not a hard place to be when you have to quarantine, right? At least it's
Correct.
Warm. It's
Exactly.
Same here in California. So, well, Fred, of course, you know, when you and I spoke a few weeks ago, the virus had just reared its ugly head, but we weren't really worried about it too much. And of course, the fates and time have changed our belief systems. And so what's on everybody's mind today, and I'm sure yours as well, is how is the coronavirus affecting our ability to generate revenues and profits out of the equity market, out of the stock market. So why don't you talk to us a bit about what your beliefs are and how you have changed in the last few weeks in terms of your perceptions and obviously the stock market demise and slight comeback yesterday, and obviously good news about the $2 trillion relief package that is helping the market. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell us your beliefs and give us a little bit of guidance about the markets today and where you think we're going.
Thank you, Michelle. Looking back over the past couple of months, we started following the coronavirus situation and were concerned about it, but didn't take any specific action. And the market largely shrugged it off until late February. We actually took money off the table at that point much to the benefit of our clients and ourselves, because I should add that what we manage, the way we manage money for clients is how we manage our own money. So my research staff started following this and started following the curves of relating to infection, hospitalization, mortality, and we become deeply concerned about the situation. Obviously, New York is right now an epicenter, and it accounts for about half of the infections in the United States to date, remarkably. California is lagging quite a bit behind. God bless. That's a positive for California. But I think the question, there are multiple questions here. One is, what is the damage going to be to the economy? I think it's going to be substantial. We'll get to the equity markets in a second. But with respect to the economy, it's going to be substantial. We know the second quarter GDP is going to be probably down in the order of 25%. No one knows exactly. And we don't know when the rebound will occur and the extent to which it will occur. If in fact the infection rates decline rapidly, and if in fact the data supports an age-based self-quarantining, meaning that those under 50 or 60 are reasonably safe to go out in the world and following good hygiene and good health habits and cleanliness habits, if those people are safe, then the economy might get up and running more quickly. I think that's not what we're hearing from the scientific experts. It is what we're hearing out of Washington. I can understand that. I'm not critical because we don't have enough data. If in fact this drags on until July or August, I think it's fair to say that a large number of small and mid-sized businesses will go out of business and not come back. Now I'm talking mostly about the corner cafe and the small local grocery store, to the extent that those exist anymore. The dry cleaner, perhaps, people of that nature. Okay, the local barber. The aid packages are designed to blunt the impact of that, and I think that may occur. But regardless, we're going to have negative GDP growth. We are in a recession. The third quarter may be a good rebound. It may not be. We believe that the rebound won't occur until the fourth quarter, and even then, it'll take time to build. We're going to have unemployment in the teens, if not the high teens, and it always takes people a long time to get back to work. This is also quite inflationary, potentially. There are some elements that argue against that, but for the time being, the federal government is printing money. It's helicopter money time. It's support. I like the fact that there's a lot of grants to consumers, but there's a lot of loans to businesses. So those businesses will have to be paid back. Unfortunately, the free market hasn't operated quite the way we would have liked, because we were prepared to take a bet against the airlines, and then we saw the aid package coming, and it kind of took the fun out of the bet. This is the money-making side of me, not the sympathetic, humanistic side of me talking when I mention that. So we're seeing a bailout there. We're seeing a bailout for Boeing, which is I think one of the most important companies in the country. So I understand the rationale on the one hand, but on the other hand, the average taxpayer, Michelle Hughes, Tony Sweet, others, we all have to recognize that we are paying for that. We're paying for those specific bailouts. So if you're not an equity owner of stocks in general, if you're not an equity owner of Boeing in particular, you're subsidizing that particular bailout. And I think that's troublesome, but it's probably in the common interest, in the interest of all of us. So you asked me about the stock market. What is the impact on the stock market? Well, we've seen obviously precipitous drops in stock price levels. The high was 33.89 for the S&P, which is probably as representative an index as you'll find. Right now, we're in the 2,600 range, as we see a lot of euphoria actually in the face of the bailout. And yesterday, as you made reference to, there was a very strong upward market. We don't fully understand why the market is reacting so positively with so many uncertainties still facing us. Unemployment, the time to get back to work. Clearly, the difference between this recession and most others This is closer to a natural disaster that's happened everywhere in the country, or potentially everywhere. It's happened at multiple points in the country. And unlike a natural disaster, it's hard to assess the damage. And it's hard to assess, what is the impact really going to be? We know it's going to be substantial. History tells us that when we have a recession of any sort, it generally takes 2 to 3 years for the economy to come back much, much stronger. It rebounds, obviously. The stock market tends to discount that and anticipate that. And we would expect that the stock market would probably rebound sooner, but we don't think it's going to be a snapback rebound. In fact, we think what's happened over the past couple of days is a snapback. I mean, we're up almost 10% in 2 days, right? Or maybe in excess of 10%. We'll see how things close at the end of the day. So when you kind of add that up, I think you basically look at equities and say, well, gee, we've had some recovery. Is there a bottom? It's impossible to pick the bottom anyway. Don't even attempt it. We took money off the table in February, not because we were trying to market time, but because we saw a freight train coming. And generally, if you see a freight train coming, you get off the tracks. And we thought that was a good idea. So we did. And that's worked out extremely well for us. With the result that we've basically performed better than the S&P remarkably in our growth portfolio, our growth strategy. And we've been able to do that with basically 43, 44, 45% cash. Why is that? It's because the stocks that we own typically are thematically driven by big data, artificial intelligence, healthcare, the modern consumer, how the consumer behaves today, financial technology, the use of plastic everywhere. It's Visa, it's MasterCard, it's PayPal. Those kinds of companies are that's where we invest. So those companies have tended to be more insulated, I should say, from the impacts. There's no escaping the impact overall in the stock market. However, this is a time when specific stock selection and having a point of view on where growth will occur is critical. So
what are the categories of the stocks that you would say we would stay in and continue to be investors?
I would say subject to balance sheet strength and subject to projected cash flows, because you have to look at the balance sheets of these companies in the face of what is going on in the world. We know that the next 2 quarters for many companies are going to have substantially depressed revenues. Some are going to have virtually no revenues, where revenues will be cut in half or more. Think about hotel companies, entertainment companies. Think about Broadway as an example, the movie theaters. All of these businesses are deeply, deeply hurt by what's going on here. And they have to have balance sheets that allow them to sustain themselves, or they're not going to survive. That's part of the purpose of the bailout, is to assist in that process. So when we look at, to answer your question, the areas that we look at are primarily, we like companies that are in recurring revenue businesses. So a lot of the software services, SaaS software companies fit into that category. Companies, and I'm not recommending any companies here, but companies like a ServiceNow, a Microsoft to some extent, Salesforce. Salesforce got different issues because of the outward-facing sales tools. But in any event, I think what you want to do is you want to have companies that have strong balance sheets, strong margins, particularly gross margins, enable you to cut costs without necessarily impacting your top line very much in the short term. So we like the software companies. We like the technology group in general, because if you look at content delivery networks, Akamai, Fastly, companies like that, those companies tend to have ongoing business. And if you think about the fact that we're on Zoom video, Zoom video is a perfect example of here's streaming video that's delivered on a content network. And Zoom, as a result of this, by the way, their stock has been going. I mean, it has really appreciated dramatically in the past month. I
was wondering about this with the increase in remote communications like Zoom and Skype and of course just the overall internet. Has there not been any kind of burden of usage on these software, on these internet sites, that because it's such a dramatic increase from the norm?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned this. I had a long call last night with a group of people, and one of them was a senior executive at one of these video streaming content delivery network companies. And he said that they generally plan to be operating at 50 or 60% of capacity in the face of a huge burst. So a Fortnite, as an example, is being released tonight or this afternoon. They know that this evening there's going to be tremendous video streaming capacity required. So now they're finding, because people are using Zoom, we're part of the problem, we're part of the opportunity. They're finding that their capacity, they're not operating a third to a half of burst capacity. They're operating at closer to 1.2, 1.3 of burst capacity, meaning that they are pretty, in their view, they are pretty much out of capacity. So their view is we have to, we're buying a lot of servers, we're spending a lot of money on capital expenditures to grow the business. Now, that business is a competitive business. Don't get me wrong. But with streaming, Disney's about to go live with its streaming video product. I think there's a big game. I think it's Mortal Kombat. The latest edition of Mortal Kombat, which I think is an Activision game, is being released, I think, this week. And the other thing they're finding is that patterns of usage, which used to be very predictable, meaning that gaming was basically going from 4 p.m. till midnight, typically. Now they're finding, by contrast, it is starting at 8 or 9 in the morning and going to midnight, because kids are staying at home, students are staying at home. And we haven't even begun to see in earnest, I don't think, the movement to education on these remotely. So when we add that into the equation, I think we are going to see tremendous capacity challenges. There won't be outages probably. What will happen is speeds will slow down. It'll be a little bit frustrating, but that's the price we pay. So Michelle, you're right. That's an example. That's exactly the kind of industry that we're trying to participate in. We're trying to participate in those industries. Likewise, think about this. We're all working from home. So that puts cybersecurity, particularly at the endpoint, at a very high premium. Endpoint cybersecurity is very, very important. So having, those companies, again, are going to be benefiting. And companies, large companies with large numbers of employees working at home productively, that they're going to want to protect that security at all costs, just as they do in a normal office environment. We have 5,000 financial advisors at Raymond James, and actually probably closer to 7,000 or 8,000 when you include all of the channels through which we operate. And most of us are working at home and are quite productive. I'm actually finding that I'm having clients call. They want to send in more money. They want to talk about their accounts. They want to put money to work. They're wondering, why are we sitting in cash? We tell them, please be patient. We'll get there. But we're able to be productive. The only reason we're able to be productive is because of the tools that we use. And that speaks to the importance of technology as a place to invest. It's one of the reasons that technology stocks this year are only down as a group 12%. Which I think is remarkable. Energy's down 50%.
Right.
Financial services, the banks are down 32%. So, and healthcare, by the way, is down 18%. So a lot of times people look at technology as being risky, and they look at things like banks or even oil and gas companies with big dividends, and they look at those as safe plays. And a lot of times what looks safe is not, and what looks risky is not. We're finding that the volatility in these technology stocks, because they are so beloved by investors who recognize the top line growth is so valuable and is where the future is going. A lot of these stocks have just not been affected very much.
So, okay, I have a question. So let's take Amazon, let's take Costco. I'm not trying to recommend stocks either. Of course, that's not my domain, but of course, their business is booming. Anything with home delivery or, so, if people want to stay in the market, there are pockets of opportunity. And I know the whole concept of market timing is critical right now. Some people think it's the time to buy the undervalued stocks and ride them back up again.
Right.
How do you guide your clients? I know impatience is one of the biggest challenges you face in
Right. Right.
your world, because people do not like to see losses.
Right.
They want to see gains, right? And so how do you guide them during a crisis like this? It's unprecedented in our lifetime.
Well, there are some analogies to 9/11, and there are some analogies to the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. One of the things I remind people is if you bought at the very top of 2008 and you held those stocks to today, including dividends, and I'm using the S&P 500 as the proxy, your total return would be about 6%. So you bought at the peak, and we're valuing you at the trough. And by the way, it's improving every day. But let's just use 6% as a downside case. If alternatively you bought at the peak and held to the peak and sold out at 33, at 33.94 just recently, your rate of return would be more like 12%. Excuse me, that was wrong. About 13.5%. So my point, and again, peak to peak, trough to trough. I mean, trough to peak is obviously terrific, but the point I'm making here is that if you hold long term, you can be rewarded in equities. I think, however, we have reached a point, having had these ETFs and logarithmic trading driving valuations. I think we've reached a point, particularly because of this rupture to the economy, where specific stock selection and specific sector selection to start, and then stock selection within sectors, is critically important. You Michelle, just raised one of the themes that we pursue, which is what we call the modern consumer. So the modern consumer has tremendous price discovery capability, right? If you're looking for a used car, I happen to be a car guy, and I want to buy, a used expensive car, I'm not going to go into my dealer and pay 100 cents in the dollar. Instead, I could probably find one 2 or 3 years old with 5, 6, 7,000 miles on it and pay 60 cents in the dollar. That has been enabled by the internet. So I go to the car sites like TrueCar and Car Gurus, and I can, so price discovery is now available. That's what's driven Amazon in large part, plus the convenience. And the way they subsidize their business, obviously, is Amazon Prime, although I'm not sure Amazon Prime, given the free delivery, is actually that profitable to them, but it certainly builds a loyalty factor. Costco's done the same thing. Half of Costco's operating income. I'm very close to Costco, very close.
Right. I remember you telling me that one of the senior executives at Costco was one of your,
yes,
that
he's
you
one
had
of my clients.
Yeah, his client, but you had mentored him as well,
yes,
right?
Yes, and he's a dear friend, and it's interesting. I mean, basically, Costco's model again is so responsive to how the consumer wants to do things today, because Costco basically generates half of its income from its membership fees.
That's
and
right.
Their gross margin is 14% as a matter of policy on all items other than Kirkland, which I think is 15%. Don't hold me to that. You can ask the investor relations people at Costco if I'm correct, but that's a little bit dated, but I'm pretty sure that's right. So you've just mentioned two companies that you can assume I like a lot because they fit into our theme of the modern consumer. The modern consumer is also a user of PayPal. The modern consumer uses Venmo for cash transfers. I owe you some money, I Venmo you the money, right?
That's right.
Here we are in the COVID-19 pandemic, and what have we learned? People don't want cash anymore. Now they really don't want to. They don't want to touch cash, let alone process it. So credit cards are critical. You have to have your Purell to clean your credit card, obviously. But I think what we're seeing, we're seeing fintech, we're seeing shopping patterns, we're seeing working patterns, and all change. they've been changing anyway, but this is accentuating some of those changes, and some of them may become somewhat part of the landscape. So let's talk as an example. I'm not a big real estate investor. You know that, Michelle, from our conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And, real estate has generally been seen as a kind of a safe haven. Well, if you look at office buildings today and you look at the ability of people to work from home, my guess is large corporations are going to be evaluating more and more how much they need in space,
Right.
maybe where that space is going to be, and how much space is excessive and they don't need it anymore. So that's obviously, as we know, pricing is driven by the incremental transaction. So if suddenly the demand for office space declines 5% or 10%, that's going to have a very substantial impact on office building valuations. We already know that the real estate attached to malls is under tremendous pressure. We know that. But think about office buildings in the same context. Now, by contrast, everybody loves warehouses and distribution because we want everything delivered to our house. And that again has been highlighted by what's gone on over the past 3 or 4 weeks.
That is, such important points that you're making here, because we are thinking strategically now. How is this virus going to change the way we do business? And of course, that does affect the way we invest and what kind of returns we're going to get for those investments. So this conversation is, incredibly compelling for that very reason. One question that comes to mind right away is everybody always flocks to gold when there's a crisis. What's happening? Right. Yeah. So what's happening now with gold, and how does that affect your world?
Michelle, I want the listeners to understand this has not been rehearsed. Michelle did not rehearse these questions. I love this question because a month ago, or I shouldn't say that, 6 months ago, I would have said, I'll never own gold. I've always learned whenever I say I'll never own something, I always do, or I'm never going to do something. I've always learned because I tend to be fairly flexible with things. But in any event, we actually are evaluating buying gold in the portfolio. And I own some gold personally, which I'd never done before, GLD. GLD does not actually, in my view, reflect what's going on in the physical gold market. GLD, by the way, is an ETF that holds physical stores of gold. And the gold price and GLD track very closely. What I don't understand is I'm told by my sources that stores of physical gold are very difficult to come by. It's very difficult to find gold, to buy it. If you want to buy gold coins, you want to buy gold bars, they're very hard to find. The New York dealers are reporting that. So the reason to hold gold, in my opinion, it's very hard to hold enough of it for it to be a strategic asset for someone. It doesn't produce income. It has carrying costs. They're all with the usual negatives. But the new supply versus the total inventory, the total supply in the world, but the new additions to supply in any 1 year tend to run about 1.2, 1.3, 1.4%. So we're not deflating the value of gold by too much supply coming on. By contrast, when you look at fiat currencies, I'm very concerned about the inflation and the loss of value of a dollar in the bank. It's one of the problems. So to me, gold has a place. Now the other currency, if you can call it a currency, that should appreciate but hasn't in the face of this is cryptocurrency.
I was just going to ask you about Bitcoin.
We all talk about fear versus greed. By the way, the fear versus greed indicator right now runs around, it's probably up today, but I think yesterday was 9. In a normal strong market, it's probably 70. In a really raging bull market, get to 95. So when it gets to 9, it's like, oh my God, that's extreme fear. And by the way, it got as low as 3 or 4 or 5, as I recall. That's extreme, abject fear. So about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we noted, my team and I noted that We had days where stocks were down precipitously, bonds were down precipitously. That doesn't usually they go in the opposite direction. And
Exactly.
gold was down and Bitcoin was down. And Bitcoin was
Right.
down. The cryptocurrencies were down actually more than anything else. What we were seeing was a flight to safety. People were
Yeah.
fleeing to safety.
They
And
were they were
so,
fleeing they were fleeing to toilet paper. Everybody
yes,
was, there was a panic, obviously panic buying and
exactly.
panic in their holdings and their investments. So when panic takes over, like you said, 9% or down to 3%, that, people are not, they're not logical in what they're
Right.
doing. So yeah, I was wondering what you were going to say about the crypto part, because I would have thought that crypto and gold would be the rebounders when the stock market and the financial markets were
Right.
collapsing. So
And gold has in fact come back a little bit. And our intention is over time we will probably layer into our growth strategies or our income strategy, which tends to be our more anchor to windward strategy. It has a strong growth orientation, but it tends to be companies that have very substantial dividends as well, but very high quality growth companies. They're out there. There aren't very many, but they're out there. So if it doesn't have good growth, we're not interested. If it doesn't have a good dividend, we're not interested. We're trying to find that intersection, and that intersection is available. We will probably buy some gold for accounts. We haven't done it yet, and it probably won't be more than 3 or 4 or 5%. We may actually buy some gold miners as part of that as well. But it's not. It's a totally defensive position. We are not in the business of playing defense. We're in the business of long-term growth using a 5 to 10 year perspective. And our track record, by the way, suggests where we have done in the growth strategy. And I'm happy to show someone who's interested what I call my reference account. First account I ever opened. It happened to be for a guy who owns part of an NBA basketball team. So he's pretty successful. And he gave me some money. And again, I have a history with the guy. I hired him and I wrote his recommendation to go to business school. And I got him his first hedge fund job. And I helped him start his first hedge fund. And he's a wonderful, wonderful human being. And he said, I like your strategy, which, by the way, is largely the same strategy that I started off with 5 years ago. And we've been running his account for 5 years. And from point to point, I'm going to say this, I shouldn't say it, but I will. We've done about 9.7% annualized net of fees. Our fee is 1%, too low, unfortunately for us. During that same period, the S&P is up about 5.4%. However, I want to add in dividends to that, so it's probably closer to 7. But regardless, okay, I think what's impressive there is the fact that we've been able to do that with a portfolio of 15 companies. So people say, gee, you're not diversified enough. Well, guess what? Our volatility has been about equal to, and it's now slightly less than the S&P 500. So again, it depends on what you own. You made the point earlier. It's what you own. So when you look at, you own companies that are at the head of the line in terms of where the world is going. And you mentioned, Amazon is a perfect example. Amazon participates in a number of themes that we consider important. It's a consumer company, but it's also a cloud software company.
That's right.
It has a huge enterprise business. And by the way, it's becoming increasingly a transportation company.
That's right.
So they participate. So if we make an investment in a company that participates in big data and data analytics, that's Amazon. And if we invest in these SaaS software companies where the software is in the cloud, that's Amazon. Oh, by the way, it's also Microsoft. Microsoft has a big cloud business. So
as is Salesforce.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of these companies, they overlap. So NVIDIA, which is a semiconductor company and known for its very strong technology relating to gaming, also sells to data centers. It also is a leader in autonomous driving. So you think about autonomous driving, you need huge amounts of data. You need unbelievably powerful and rapid processing power because you can't afford to have a delay or otherwise the pedestrian gets run over. I'm kidding. At least I hope I'm kidding.
Well,
So when a lot of these themes, big data, artificial intelligence, technology, they technology devices, they tend to come together. So what we're trying to do is find strong companies at the intersection of those what we consider to be the future. So we call this offhand, we don't use the term now. We call this strategy the dynamic research portfolio, but I really want to call it the future focused fund, because our focus is almost entirely in the future. It's where the world is going. It's not where it's been. And when people say to me, yeah, but gee, doesn't oil look really cheap now? I'd say, yes, it does look really cheap, but that's not what I do. I don't make trades. I don't want to buy something that doubles and say, God, was I lucky? Let's get out of that now, because I don't believe in energy. If I don't believe in energy, I don't want to participate in energy, meaning fossil fuels.
So Fred, what about ESG? So right now, nobody's really focused on environmental, social, and corporate governance. Yet that has been the guideline for people like you to make investment decisions. So what's happening with ESG, and how are you managing to continue to use those guidelines of a company's corporate governance, for example, their environmental and their social involvement as parameters for investing when the markets are in disarray? Does it affect you at all?
It's so when people ask me about ESG, I think they have to understand the context from where I'm coming from. So I got in the business, basically I came to Wall Street 44 years ago. So I would say that a substantial percentage of the companies where we invest, I either know a director or I know management. I know these companies. These are not like, oh, gee, I've never heard of that company. Let's go look at it. Let's invest. By and large, I've had tremendous. I have tremendous insight into a lot of these companies just as the result of 4.5 decades of experience. So I think quality of management and the ethics and morality of management are critical. So when you have that, you typically have good corporate governance. I don't want to deal with guys who, anybody who's gone bankrupt previously, I'm sorry, I'm just not that interested in you. I'm certainly not interested if you are litigious. And I'm certainly not interested if you have a felony background. I know those sound like, my God, who fits into that category? But what kind of board do you have? You have a diverse board. Are you looking for diversity in the board? And I mean diversity of opinion. I mean, generally speaking, that's if you don't have a couple of female directors who are ballsy and open-minded and argumentative and straightforward, you're losing something. Okay, so I like that. Okay, I like that in companies. The very nature of the companies that we choose, they can afford to be environmentally sensitive, and their employees, their lifeblood are their smart young people, and they're demanding it. So by and large, there's a self-selection process that we already kind of go through without even thinking about it. We don't have to think about, gee, is this an ESG sensitive company? It generally speaks for itself. Now, clients have not yet asked us, okay, to be ESG. However, we kind of think if they were to ask us, this ongoing exercise we have, are there any companies in the portfolio where we would be troubled, where we would be upset, where we would feel, gee, maybe this is not a company that is deserving of our ownership? We haven't really found that. I think the problem with ESG is it's very hard to measure superficially. It's you have to know the companies well. And I think a lot of these measures, a lot of people have built businesses around ESG rankings. If you dig in and you kind of look at the quality of the inputs, I think you'd question the value of the outputs. So what do you think? And I know this is just an opinion; it's not necessarily affect any investment decisions. But what do you think of what happened with Burr and Feinstein and Kelly Loeffler? What from a Wall Street perspective that you have, what do you think about a politician gaining on the heels of a crisis that they allegedly knew about
well before we did, ethically speaking. I
Um,
don't want to put you in a compromised
no,
position.
no,
I mean,
no, Michelle, you, people don't follow me on Facebook, Fred Lane on Facebook. Okay.
okay.
I posted something 2 or 3 days ago. There's been a proposed constitutional amendment, the 28th constitutional amendment. And it basically is a very simple proposal that members of Congress should have no benefits greater than or distinctive from those of the general population.
Mm.
So when you consider that pension plans, basically Congress makes up its own rules and takes care of itself. One term in Congress and you are paid a pension of that salary for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Pretty good investment. Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad way to, and it adds a little bit of, it's in, okay. Likewise, okay. And this is, as I understand it, if a member of Congress takes out if his child takes out a student loan and defaults, they don't have to pay it back.
Mm.
They don't participate in the same healthcare plan we do. Their healthcare plan is far better than Medicare or Medicaid, far better.
Mm.
It's an absolute top of the line concierge plan. It's great. Okay. Well, my view is that by definition, you're creating, I mean, these are the same clowns who don't seem to be able to get anything done anyway. So I feel very strongly that that what these people did highlighted a problem. Okay, the problem is, and by the way, I would argue that what they did isn't much different than if I sat down with a epidemiologist with the Harvard School of Public Health, and he said to me, this COVID thing is really bad. You ought to take it into account. I think what they did isn't much different from that. So I don't think it's the best example, but I do think there are examples where there's been insider trading or trading
Right.
in advance of proprietary knowledge in a specific company. What they did is they basically said, let's take some money off the table. And I get that. But what I don't understand is my understanding was of how their portfolios are supposed to be managed is that they were supposed to be in blind trusts.
Mm-hmm.
If it's in a blind trust, you're not allowed to talk to your money manager and tell him, hey, I think we should lighten up. That's up to him.
Mm-hmm.
Those are supposed to be, I thought, wholly discretionary portfolios.
If they were on Wall Street, the SEC would be investigating, and but there would be potentially huge damages to them. And as far as I know, there's nothing happening to take action against.
Well, insider trading. So I have I ran the M&A group at Donaldson, Lufkin and Generac for 10 years. So I'm very familiar with insider trading and the rules around it. And believe me, you don't want to get close to the edge. But the other side of it is insider trading is very hard to prosecute successfully. And one of the problems here, I think you've highlighted that this problem is really a problem of the rules around how their portfolios are managed. So in my view, their portfolios should be managed on a totally blind trust basis, and they should not be able to have input to say, here's what I think you ought to be doing based on inputs that I have, which might be proprietary inputs. Look, it just leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, understandably.
Exactly. Everybody's suffering. And to hear this is very discouraging. And to know that they're getting away with it in a world where everybody is having to sacrifice for what is happening in a crisis that we've never known of this caliber. We've never known. I mean, we had 9/11. We've had other pandemics, but nothing has been like this. So I guess.
Yeah, 9/11 was by the way, 9/11 and the Great Recession have there's a lot of analogies. It's interesting. One of the reasons the spread has become such a problem, in my view, is that people tend to look at natural disasters from their own lens, meaning the closer they are to the natural disaster, the more it hits home, the more it's upsetting, the more it changes their behavior. So I live in the Northeast. You live in California. I'm sure you have a lot of friends who have been impacted by the horrible fires in Sonoma and Napa, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Horrible. And yet people in the Northeast, they read about it. And then, now we have friends out there and we know how devastating it's been. We have a friend who lost all of his vines in his vineyard. We have another friend, a bigger vineyard, and he had private insurance covering private firefighting to protect his vineyards. So I'm very sensitive to that. But if you live in Idaho or you live in Des Moines, and I was on the phone last night with a guy who is in Idaho right now, and he said, we don't see COVID-19 here at all. Life goes on. Yeah, the restaurants are closed because we've been told to close the restaurants. But in general, we don't see it here at all. So if you live in New York, you're very sensitive to COVID-19. If you live in Boston, you're somewhat sensitive. Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, New York currently is almost half the cases in the country.
But, and just by coincidence, New York is the hub of our financial world. Obviously the stock market being based there, and Wall Street, and of course San Francisco is the West Coast hub. So, Fred, I don't want to cut us off because I love talking with you, but we're going to run out of time. And I know you said you wanted to offer our viewers a way to connect with you, because I'm sure after watching this video, there are going to be people who want to know you and your firm and your capabilities more. And I know the parameters are changing about how to pick an investment advisor or someone to manage your trust, or things. People have different objectives today, but they all are bottom line still the same. They don't want to lose money. They want to be sure that money is protected. So what is it that you would like to offer? I know you said there's a minimum of the
our normal minimum investment size is $750,000. We for people who are subscribers to your services, Michelle, we'd be happy to cut that to $500,000. Likewise, our fee across the board has always been 1%. It's painful for me to suggest cutting that. However, I will say this: if someone wants to invest $1 million or more, we will cut that fee to 90 basis points. I know it doesn't sound like very much, but I have to coexist. I have to treat my current client properly.
Right. Well, 1% is a very reasonable fee to be charging compared to a lot of the other brokerage firms. So I would say that that's very fair, what you just offered.
Michelle, let me speak to that point, because what's interesting about it is most people will say, well, gee, my advisor charges me 60 basis points. What they're not factoring in is that advisor is buying third-party services.
Exactly.
He's buying a mutual fund that may be costing the investor up to a point or more.
Right.
Index, if you buy specialized ETFs, one of the reasons we don't have an ETF strategy to do what we want to do with these thematic investments is most of the ETFs are very small and illiquid, oh, by the way, and the fees are very large. I'm talking about if you want a robotics ETF, right? Okay, so what we've done is we actually we take that entire list of companies and we screen them based on quality of earnings and other metrics and decide, what's the universe we want to dig in and do fundamental research on. So the point is, we are the product that your financial advisor probably is using, but we're the financial advisor too. So it's an integrated product. And one of the reasons I approach it this way is I love the challenge of managing money effectively. And I love trying to see, am I doing as well as I think I am? And I have to tell you, Michelle, I go through periods of not liking the results, but having done this for 5 years now and looking at the track record, which I'm happy to share privately with anybody who wants to reach out to me. I feel pretty good about things. And I might add that, I have family members on my own money in this strategy, most of my money. And it's very important to me that I do exactly as you say. We don't lose people's money over time. That's why we don't make bets. And we also buy high quality companies that have demonstrable growth parameters and growth metrics that are favored by secular growth trends and demographics. That's the bottom line of how we do things. So to reach me, people want to.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to. How would our viewers reach you?
I think probably the best way would be, I'm going to give you a phone number to call or text me. That may
Okay.
be easiest for a lot of people in today's world. And
Okay.
that's my cell phone, which is 617-835-4842. Or you can email me, fred.lane@raymondjames.com. RAYMOND James JAMES.com. I would actually probably prefer a text
Right.
above all else, just because we don't lose texts. They don't
Right.
hit spam filters.
Right.
They're not part of this great unwashed massive email we have come in every day. And I would want to be responsive to anybody who reached out.
Right. And they can also reach me if they need to from my website, because you're featured on my website. Your bio is there. And once
Right.
we have this podcast edited, we will have your podcast there so people can listen again if they want to. And by the way, my website is agelessandtimeless.com. My cell number is 808-639-0904. And if anyone has questions and wants to talk to me first before contacting you, I'm happy to do that. Fred, would you just one more time repeat your phone number, because you cut out a little bit on the one number?
So it's a Boston area code, 617, and then it's 835 4842.
617-835-4842. Okay, that's what I need. Okay, well, I'm afraid our time is up, and I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day. I know you've been working 10-hour days easily during the last few weeks, and that's going to be continuing, I'm sure. So thank you for being a guest on Ageless and Timeless. You've provided us with some very valuable and compelling information, and hopefully we will have much better times and have you back when the market is rebounded. Thank you again.
Yeah, I just want to add one, I guess, disclaimer here. Nothing I've said, I hope, should be construed as a specific recommendation to buy any specific stock.
Right.
If anybody wants to call me, however, and discuss anything I've discussed, or frankly anything else, they should feel free to do so.
Right.
I actually enjoy the stimulation of people who have observations and see things that I'm not thinking about, and
I think, a lot of times when you talk to people like you, they charge you for that first consultation, and you're so generous that you're offering that initial consultation. The client can consider you along with others if they want to do so, but you're offering that as a complimentary to our viewers. So that's another value for Ageless and Timeless viewers to remember when they make that phone call or send you that text.
Michelle, I want to add one other thing. I know we're running out of time. Whenever we take on a client, if we're taking on a client and we're managing a lot of their money, 50, 60, 70% of their money, or less even, it can be, we're always going to do a financial plan with them if they're willing to do so. We want to do that. And we don't charge for that either. Now, you might say, well, why would you do that? Why would you give away that planning process and the modeling and the simulations? And the reason is because we get to know the client better. We get to know their objectives better. We get to know their risk tolerances, and we can serve the client. Because this is ultimately an interpersonal business. This is not a business that I see in the short term, at least, as we may be able to use machine learning and artificial intelligence to our benefit, but it doesn't replace the subtleties of listening to what the client's objectives are.
Perfect. Thank you, Fred. Okay, you have a beautiful day, and we'll
Michelle.
Okay, take care.
Hopefully I'll see you in California in not too distant future.
Yeah, I hope that the travel is going to open up soon, and yes, you'll be coming out here to visit us at Postline, and that's a whole other. We're going to have Froda come on the podcast as well to talk about what we now know, disruption with a very different definition than we did when we saw each other.
Yes, indeed. In
All
fact,
right,
actually, thank you for reminding me. I've got to take care of a due bill I have to Froda.
Yes, that's right. He'll be very happy, particularly in these times. He'll be happy to receive that. Thank you, Fred.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, Michelle.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Well, I hope today was a very informative day for everyone, as it was for me. I always say I learn as much that from my guests as I can teach them, and of course, more so because these are people who are experts in their field, and they're providing us with information and awareness. And although we didn't get into Fred's personal side today in terms of his philosophies of business and so forth. He did share with us without even being prompted so much about who he is as a person. So I just want to say we're very lucky to have had Fred join us, and we'll have him back again when the markets have rebounded so we can have a different discussion. So thank you very much for joining us today. This is Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless saying have a beautiful day.